Hey everybody, it's Erik Torenberg, co-founder, partner of Village Global, a network-driven venture firm. And this is Venture Stories, a podcast covering topics relating to tech and business with world-leading experts. We are very lucky to have Sander joining us. Hey everybody. Sander Daniels is one of the co-founders of Thumbtack. Thumbtack is a fascinating company with a fascinating origin story, and we're excited to get into it. It's had a lot of ups, it's had downs, and Sander is going to be very candid in his explanations to us about his business. He's been a friend of mine for many years. But first, he does do Thumbtack, but I also want to let everyone here know that he is a Barry's Bootcamp warrior. He is just an animal, a true beast on the treadmill. And Sander, first, can you just comment on that? What inspires you to do that? How do you do that? How are you handling COVID in a post Barry's Bootcamp world?
Erik, I take every day as it comes. There's never a lack of surprise in the world. I love berries. I love doing berries with you. It's just, you got to challenge yourself to the fullest. Berries is where it's at. So what can I say?
Amazing. With that as a segue, so Sander, you have a unique co-founder origin story. So you started Thumbtack in what, 2008, 2009?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, people here in OnDeck, they're looking for co-founders, looking for frameworks on how to think about co-founders. They're also thinking about how to think about startup ideas, which we'll get to next. First, describe Thumbtack, and then describe your co-founder origin story and what lessons people can take from it. What frameworks you'd recommend people think about?
Great. Well, first of all, I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. Thanks a million, Erik and team. I respect OnDeck and everything that you're doing enormously. So huge high five to the organizers here and all of you that are a part of it. Really excited about what you're building. So let me give you a very brief overview first of Thumbtack, just so everybody's baselined, and then we can maybe rewind history a little bit to talk about the origin. Thumbtack. Thumbtack is a marketplace for local services. So if you need to hire a contractor for your home, a tutor for your kid, a photographer for your wedding, you can find it on our marketplace. We've been around, like Erik mentioned, since 2008, 2009. We have about 600 people across San Francisco, Salt Lake City, and the Philippines. We've raised a bunch of venture capital, for better or for worse, about $450 million over the course of 6-7 rounds. We operate across 1,000 different categories of service. So home maintenance is our biggest category, moving, landscaping, electrical, plumbing. We're probably, however, the third biggest event services in the country behind Wedding Wire and The Knot. So that's all things DJ, catering, photography, videography. Health, beauty, and wellness. We're probably the biggest personal training marketplace in the country. Massage therapy, tutors, teachers, and lessons and beyond. And then geographically, we mirror population density graph of the United States almost exactly. So LA, New York, Chicago, Houston are our biggest markets, but we're equally penetrated in the outskirts of like Savannah, Georgia, as we are downtown San Francisco. So that is Thumbtack at a very high level. Let's rewind back to the origin story. So let me take you back to 2008. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area in Virginia. I felt very lucky for the opportunities I've been given since I was a kid. And I knew that when I got older, I'd want to do something that made an impact. So the first route that took for me was politics, public policy, law. I went to law school. I thought I was going to be in the political world my entire career. While I was there, I kept in touch with a couple friends who had gone a similar route for similar motivations. They were working at the White House at the time. And we got together and we said, well, politics is one way to make a difference, but there's another way, which is technology. So for a year, we had weekly phone calls where we brainstormed ideas of things we could start, if successful, would create an impact. And we were not set on it being a tech company. We were considering nonprofits, political advocacy organizations. But what we eventually landed on was the idea for Thumbtack. It was clear there was a very real human problem to be solved here for both consumers and even more acutely for service professionals who need to find ways to put money in their pockets, food on the table for their families every day. It was also clear there was a big business opportunity. So there were these global marketplaces for products, Amazon, eBay, Alibaba, but there was no global marketplace for services yet. So that's what we went out to build. It's what we've been building towards since day one. And if you think back to that time, it was a very different world than the world you're in today, starting a company in tech. Back then, tech was not part of the cultural zeitgeist. Tech founders were not on the covers of magazines. I was at Yale on the East Coast, and nobody I knew was going to the West Coast to be in tech. Everybody was doing banking, consulting, law. Y Combinator didn't exist, or maybe it had just started that same year. There was no real angel community to note. So a lot of the infrastructure that we have today didn't exist back then. So going and doing this was unusual. None of my friends were doing it. And the biggest part of taking this risk was really the social pressure against doing it. When I said I'm going to San Francisco, I'm married, I have a kid, I'm moving out there, my friends thought I was crazy, and my parents, most of all, thought I was idiotic. I was at this prestigious, fancy law firm job making a bunch of cash, and here I said I was going to go do this crazy thing that was never going to succeed with a couple friends, and they thought like that's the worst decision I've ever made in my entire life. So anyway, that's a little bit about the origin story. Also happy to dive into kind of the founder relationships and dynamics, but Erik, I'll let you kind of guide.
It's interesting because on the co-founder path, you seem to have followed the sort of traditional advice of, hey, take your buddies who you've known for a long time and start a company with them. But on the idea path, you seem to have taken the untraditional or non-recommended path, which is instead of focus on something that you are personally passionate about or you are feeling the problem, you do sort of a sober, methodical analysis of a tops-down, market-driven, what's a big opportunity, insert here, let's go do it. So let's touch on both of those. And maybe let's start with the co-founder. What was it about you three? And I think none of you are developers. What was it about you three that was a perfect co-founding team / and what's your advice to others, to people in this room who are thinking about their co-founders? Should it be people they've known for a long time? How should they think about dating? What is your philosophy on co-founders?
Great. So let's talk about founders and then ideas. So I feel very lucky every day for the founders that the founding team I got to be a part of with Marco and Jonathan. We're not developers. We took a lot of flack for many years for not being developers. That's one way we bucked the conventional wisdom, by being a founding tech team with no developer talent. There is a fourth founder. He was with the company for 12 or 18 months. He took a leap, moved from DC to SF. He's still one of our good friends, but left the company early. So it's been the other three of us since then. And here's what I'll say, it feels like more than half of startups implode from poor founder dynamics. And having been doing this now for a dozen years, I can see why that is. The highs are so high, the lows are so low, and there are so many points along the way at which your pride can take a hit and your relationship with your founders becomes negative. You start pointing fingers. You feel like you're not doing right by one another. They're not doing right by you. You're not getting your fair slice of the pie. And what I will say is there have been is that we now have a stronger relationship, us three, than any other relationship I have in my entire life, other than the one I have with my wife. And that has been a hard labor of love. One thing that we all have in common is that we keep perspective. So we have taken a very long-term outlook to this business. We've said we are taking a multi-decade approach to this business. And so what that has meant in practice is that the day-to-day small things, or even week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year small things that get under your skin and can erode that relationship, having the long-term outlook has helped us see beyond that. And it said like, okay, this month or this year, I'm going to take a hit on my role or whatever I think my fair share of the slice of X is. It's in service of the longer term vision. And I'm not going to be the one to bring down this ship. So the others are the same way. Jonathan and Marco, they're my brothers, and none of us has ever done anything to make us feel like we're undermining each other's trust in one another. We have each other's backs. That's not to say we haven't had our problems. So in the early days, for the first 3, 4, 5 years, we were younger, we were early in our careers. We didn't know what our own strengths and weaknesses were. And so each of us thought we could do things and were good at things that turns out we actually weren't very good at. So we went through a number of rounds of executive coaching, and our Series C investors in particular came in and they said, congrats, you've raised a bunch of money. Now it's time to grow up. And for us, that meant 2 things. First was hiring an exec team, so leaders of all the departments in the company. And the second thing was hiring executive coaches. And I will never forget when we hired these exec coaches. They came in and they said, okay, Sander, we have 125 question survey that asks everything about how you work. Give us the list of 10, 12, 15 people in life who are closest to you. We're going to administer this survey to them and get some data. And so they did that. They got data. They brought me into a room. And if I were ever under any impressions previously about what I was good and not good at, well, then they were entirely shattered during that session. So for me, for example, what they said was, okay, Sander, the data shows that everybody loves working with you. You are a true culture promoter. You are an incredible organizer and hard worker. You are so optimistic. You're always a cheerleader for the team. However, like 99% of people, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. So you're so optimistic that you speak in superlatives. For you, everything is the greatest or the best thing ever, or like the dumbest idea you've ever heard. And because you're speaking that way, nobody trusts anything you say. You have entirely undercut everyone's judgment in you. So I said, holy cow. So I took that really personally, because here I was thinking that this central part of my personality, being fun, funny, a team player, a culture promoter, was my biggest strength. And here the coaches were telling me it was the thing that was hurting me the most. And this is a core part of my personality. So for the next 18 months, I kind of went into my shell and I reprogrammed my personality in the way I speak almost entirely, so that when I came out of that, people never knew that about me. Today, I talk to people and they say, oh, like, you're kind of boring. You're reasonable. You're even keeled. I would never imagine that about you. And that's one way in which I personally have identified my strengths and weaknesses and really taken that feedback to heart to grow and mature over time. Marco and Jonathan have had that growth mindset as well and have changed themselves fundamentally through the course of the founding of the team. Where I think founders really get into trouble is they don't have a long-term outlook on the business, and it becomes more of a transactional relationship. What have you done for me lately? What's been my cut lately? And 2, if they're not really self-examining in a serious way, and they're not able to hear feedback well, and they're not able to take that feedback and change their behaviors and actions to address it, which is one of the hardest things we can all do. So that's a little bit that I'll say about the founder relationship.
Let's talk about the idea generation process. Is the process that you underwent, or you describe it a little bit, and is that a process you recommend to others?
So the conventional wisdom around building a startup and coming up with an idea is you need to work on something that you're familiar with, that you know that's a problem for you. The way we went about figuring out the idea for Thumbtack was totally different. We bucked the conventional wisdom. We went after a problem that wasn't a problem we had really. I wasn't hiring service professionals back in college. I wasn't a blue collar worker myself. So I didn't know this community at all. What we did instead was more of a consulting style, blue sky brainstorm about, okay, what are the absolute biggest industries out there in the world, and which of them seem ripe for disruption, are totally inefficient, and are ones at the end of the day that we can understand. And the fact of the matter is that, like, for a smart person with a month of hard work, you can come to, understand an industry in an 80-20 way pretty quickly. So that's not that hard of a hurdle to overcome. So that's what we did. I think too many people build problems that are their own problems. And because, a lot of us we're the 5% of the 1%, you end up building problems for the 5% of the 1%. I think there's just enormous opportunity to go after problems that the 80% of the world have that you aren't part of. But it's created an interesting dynamic as we've scaled the company. Our employees at Thumbtack, the 500, 600 employees, we are not our target demographic. Our target consumer is like your stay-at-home house mom in the Midwest who has a bunch of kids and is the manager of household. And they're hiring, a painter and the electrician and ordering groceries and blah, blah, blah. And our target customer on the supply side is the service professional. And these are maybe they have a college education. They probably finished high school, and they have been in family businesses and trades that they are true professionals at. They've cultivated over decades. They are extremely hard workers, but they're great at moving offices and homes from one place to another, maybe, but they're not great at technology and digital marketing. So they do what they're good at. We do what we're good at. And it's a partnership. But being in the shoes of our customer has been a real struggle. However, that's just a natural result of us going after a problem that wasn't our own at all.
Yeah. And, one challenge with sort of the tops down sort of approach is really just how do you get to conviction? And how do you know when you should pursue something versus, be insecure that, hey, who am I to do this because it's been tried before, or I don't have expertise in it. My understanding is that the first idea you pursued was something like Mint.com, but then Mint.com came out and you decided not to do that. How did you get to conviction on Thumbtack? Amazon for services, it's not like you're the first person to have ever thought about it. How did you get to conviction that this was the why now, or you had a different approach than other people? How did you get conviction that this is good?
So a couple things. In this brainstorm, we came up with a number of ideas, and the first one was, okay, why don't we create an aggregator for finances? You can connect your home loan, your student debt, blah, 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 and then we'll make money by upselling you on better financial products. And we were dialed into that. We had been working on it for 6 weeks, and then Mint.com launched and won TechCrunch 50, which was this big tech prize back then. And we were so crushed. And that was our first real setback as a company. But we allowed ourselves to be crushed for a couple of days. And then we said, okay, well, actually, it was a good idea. So we're on the right track. And now, in retrospect, we are very grateful that we didn't go after that problem, because it turns out Thumbtack was a much bigger problem. So when we started building Thumbtack, first, the intellectual foundation felt behind it. It was all right, the time is coming for this to all come online. It's not going to be in the future where yellow pages are being delivered to people's doorsteps, or movers are stapling their flyers to telephone poles. That's backwards. We're going to have a marketplace in the future. So the intellectual foundation was there. But then on top of it, once we started building, there were so many validation points along the way. Oh my gosh, when we got in touch with service professionals and started talking to them in the field, they were so hungry for more leads and more customers. I will jump through as many hoops as you need to find new customers for my painting business. Oh, you have a website that can help me do this? Great. Your website sucks, but I am going to hack it really in a crazy way to make it work for my business. Same thing for consumers. It was just it was an existing industry. Local services are basically inelastic. It's you need them, and we knew that was a gigantic market. So, okay, if we could just figure out a way to build in this, we knew it would work. And we weren't the first ones to have the idea. So hundreds of other startups have tried to tackle this space in different ways since we started. We're kind of the last one standing, with one other named Home Advisor, Angie's List. And I'm happy to talk about why that is and why the approach we took was really unique compared to many other companies.
Well, let's back up. Let's get into that in a second. First, I want to address Athena Khan's question. And Athena is building also for a different customer with Ladder, tackling sort of an enormous problem. What do you talk about with the sort of surprises you've encountered when working with a customer base very different from yourself?
There have been many surprises. However, the thing I would say I am most surprised is how hard it really is to disentangle your own view of the world and your own experiences from what your customer needs. We have long struggled to do true user research, to integrate the user research in a productive way into our product. And I think many people at Thumbtack would say that slowed us down over the years. We too often have taken a tech-centric approach, or like our own demographic approach to the problem. Okay, one example of this is we have a view of the world that local services, like all other industries, will be mobile and instant one day. Okay, so one implication of that is the phone and conversations over the phone are going to become a thing of the past. So for years and years and years, we resisted building into the product an easy way to connect customers with local service professionals by phone. We pushed messaging, we pushed instant transactions and calendaring on the phone. But it turns out the local services industry is built around phone calls. People getting on the phone, talking about their project, what are the nuances, where do you live, what are the price estimate, blah, blah, blah. And so it's only recently that we've built easy ways to talk, for people to talk by phone into the product. And I think that's an example of like where our like tech-centric ideology or our own demographic got in the way of building the right thing for our customers. It's really hard to overcome.
Totally. This
You're
is
muted.
This is a combination of Athena and Ashita's questions. Talk about basically how you got this thing to work. How did you hack initial distribution? How did you source demand side early customers? And what were sort of the unlocks or secrets or insights that made this work?
Yeah. So let me share how I kind of think of the development of the company over time. I think of it as there being 4 phases, basically. The first 2 phases were all about building liquidity in the marketplace. So this is the first 4, 5, 6 years of the company's life. When we started out, we said, okay, how do you build a marketplace at scale? Let's look at the current major marketplaces out there: eBay, Amazon, Craigslist. Those were the preeminent marketplaces in the world. Okay, what are 2 things we notice about them that are in common? One is they are really ugly and janky. The UIs and UXs stink. The brands kind of stink. 2 is they have all the liquidity in the world. They are the world's greatest marketplaces because they have all the supply and all the demand. So the lesson that we took from that is that we are going to focus exclusively on massively scaling supply and demand, on marketing, basically. And we're going to punt building a delightful product, a delightful brand, UI and UX for until after we build that core initial liquidity, okay? So that was insight number 1. Many other companies, I would say the predominance of other companies that went after this space, they did the opposite. They focused on building a beautiful brand, a delightful, smooth product, comms and PR in the early days, winning competitions, getting TechCrunch articles, blah, blah. We were like not focused on that stuff at all. To our detriment a little bit at the end of the day, but we didn't think about that stuff at all. So we said we're going to focus on liquidity. So that's the first 50% of Thumbtack's life. The first of the 2 phases there was building supply. We said, okay, how do you sign up supply at scale for 0 cost? And what we hit on there was email marketing. So we crawled billions of pages across the internet. We used machine learning classification to try to guess whether the websites we were crawling were service professional websites. And if we thought it was a service pro website, we pulled email and phone number. So we built a huge database of local service professional contact information in the United States. And so we would email like Tom the plumber in Tallahassee. Hey, Tom, there's a customer down the street who needs their sink replaced this weekend. Click on this link to respond to that customer and then register your business for free on Thumbtack. So we did that and we signed up 250,000 people. This is one of those like classic growth hacks. Alongside all of that, we were like deep into Craigslist, alongside Airbnb, Uber, Lyft in the early days that were also using Craigslist. And this was like one of those classic moment in time growth hacks / channels that you could really leverage and then kind of closed off. And there are a number of different growth hacks and channels over the course of time, and new technologies come and go. Like the one we use today, Craigslist, web scraping, email marketing, like that wouldn't work today for a variety of reasons. But there's new ones today. So that is how we thought of building supply. And then for the next 2-3 years, all anybody at the company was focused on, the 12, 15 people at the company were focused on, was the same problem except for demand. How do you sign up millions of consumers at scale for little cost? And what we hit on there was SEO. One day, one of the other founders was in a bar in the Castro, and he sat down next to some random person and explained Thumbtack to him. And the guy got out his phone and started looking at Google search results and said, "Holy cow, you have an enormous SEO opportunity in front of you." And my co-founder, Jonathan, turned to him and said, "What's SEO?" So we had never heard of search engine optimization. And this is one classic example of, whether your company succeeds is dependent, on hard work and smarts, but also enormously on good luck and fortune. This was one of those moments for us. This guy, he became our first angel investor, our first outside board member, and he taught us everything we know about SEO. So for the next 3 years, I led the team to completely architect our SEO strategy, our site architecture, our link building, our content building strategy. And we became world-class in it, best in the world. So that was our scaled growth channel in demand. And it was literally something that it was an all-out effort and bet for 18 or 24 months. Nobody was focused on anything else. We became world-class at it. And then once we solved that, we moved out onto the next thing. So a couple thoughts. One real takeaway is that what we have done for many years, basically since the beginning of the company's life, is focus on one thing at a time. We've said, okay, what is the one thing that we must become truly world-class at to get this business to the next level? For 2 or 3 years, it was signing up supply. For 2 or 3 years, it was signing up demand. And then for the following 2 or 3 years, the third quartile of the company's period, it was scaling. After having gone 3-4 years without any recognition, we almost went out of business trying to raise a Series A round. We talked to 45 venture capital firms. They all said no. We weren't getting any recognition, on and on. Then supply came together, demand came together. We built a revenue model on top of it. And then in our Series B round, Sequoia invested, and it was like, holy cow, we felt like we graduated from Harvard or something. And for the next 24 months, we went from having raised $3 or $4 million to $250 million. So for that third period of the company's life, it was all about scaling, building architecture and the systems into the business, migrating from static servers in Dallas to AWS, building our design systems and foundation, our data systems and foundation, our brand, our culture, our recruiting. There were entire quarters where we shipped no product because we were just focused on scaling. So one thing at a time rather than doing a lot of little small bets.
Yeah. And Marco recently published a piece, maybe it was 6 months ago, maybe it was a year ago, talking about how, the journey has had ups and downs and a pivot as well. And this sort of segue into Aaron's question, which is, if you could redo that strategy, what would you have done differently?
So the journey has had so many ups and downs along the way. There have been months, years where it's just felt like a world of shit. And it's going to be like that on any journey. And that never goes away. There are, in retrospect, a million things we would have done differently. At this point, we have a really solid team behind us. We've been doing this for many years now. We have some of the best execs in the world at our side. We ourselves have grown. So hopefully we make fewer mistakes than we used to. But there are so many mistakes in the early days. there's a couple buckets that come to mind. One is on the business itself. Two is on managing people. So the first on the business itself is back when we started back in 2009 or whatever, the whole tech community was focused on user growth. So this was like Twitter, Pinterest, Facebook, blah, blah, blah. They were all growing users and ignoring revenue. So we said, all right, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to grow users and ignore revenue. We went way too long without building a revenue model for ourselves. I think the world is a little different today, not just post-COVID, but previously. Founders have revenue on their mind and know it's in their best interest to build out a revenue model and start earning money early. But the earlier you can do that, the better. The more control you have, the more leverage you have over investors and on and on. So we delayed for way too long building a revenue model. So that's one in the business. And then another thing is people. I am so grateful anytime somebody joins Thumbtack, takes the risk for even a period of their journey. And an enormous portion of my best friends are people that we've hired at Thumbtack. But people come and go. And people are right at certain stages of the company and not right at other stages of the company. So many of our biggest mistakes, I would say, I think everybody would agree, are moments where we've kind of like kept somebody in the business for a little too long, or kind of felt hesitant to have that tough conversation with somebody about like, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and here are the things, here is what I'm hearing from you and seeing from you, and here's kind of like my expectations and how they differ a little bit. Let's talk about that in a helpful, productive way. Instead, in the early days, we were either risk of a conflict averse, and we didn't have those conversations, or we approached them in the wrong way. We didn't know how to do it. So I would have gotten coaching much earlier to have those types of conversations, and I would have just had them much earlier and more quickly.
I want to ask Macy Huang's question, which is on SEO. And I remember many years ago we were chatting. You said you'd just gotten back from, I think it was Germany or something, where there was a Stocktoberfest, which is some SEO conference, combined with Oktoberfest. So what's the difference between being good at SEO and being truly great at SEO, such that you're attending Stocktoberfest?
Yeah, SE Oktoberfest is this group of like elite SEO people that's held every year in Germany, and in a great change, unexpected in careers. That's part of where my career went. So to be truly great at SEO, it basically requires taking a bet on the channel that most people are not in a position or very reluctant to take. The reason I say that is because to really see results in SEO, it takes 12, 18, 24 months. So you have to be both in a cash position to be able to take that bet, invest significant resources during that time before seeing any results, and you have to have the conviction that it's a right channel for your business. It's not right for every business. So our outside counsel and advisor in particular gave us that ultimate conviction, like, okay, you have an enormous opportunity here. Trust me. I've done this before. If you do everything I say, this is going to work. And then so we had the conviction, and it was, we bet the company on it. Had it not worked out, we would have failed and got under. The second piece of it was then, okay, what are the actual mechanics of this, and what's the team you have to build behind it? Okay, so site architecture, that's the easiest part. That's an eng dev technical job of building the right URL structure to make sure that your site is optimized for Googlebot and crawling. Link building is still extremely important. There's kind of a myth out there that Google has tried to abstract away link building from being effective. That's not true. It's still highly effective, but you have to do it in the right way that is high quality. So really quick example of something insane that we did to build links was we said, what can we do that will get the absolute highest quality links from the most reputable sources on the internet? And so we brainstormed and came up with a survey of our small businesses. We surveyed 250,000 businesses about how friendly they thought their state or city was to small businesses. We partnered with a reputable nonprofit and their PhD economists to work on this survey with us. We then built a data visualization to highlight these results. And it wasn't just one, it was a data visualization for every state's results, the top 80 metros results. And we put that visualization strategically into our site architecture so that links would go deep into our site architecture. Then we spun up a team of 30 people in the Philippines to build a database of 40,000 email addresses of 3 people at all 8,000 newspapers in the radio stations, all 2,000 TV stations, the president and press person at all 2,000 chambers of commerce in the country. And we wrote 130 press releases, one for every state and city. And then over the course of 9 weeks, we emailed the results, the local results of this survey to all of these people. And it was a huge bet. I invested 5 months in it full time. We had no idea if this was going to work. And on launch day, we sent out the first of emails to like the first, Alabama. And it turned into this media sensation. So, the mayor of Nashville is being interviewed on their local TV affiliate 6 p.m. saying, why did you only get a D+ in Thumbtack's small business survey? What's going on? Or congratulations to the San Antonio mayor who got an A+. And, every year since then, we've had a link from utah.gov governor's website to our Utah webpage. And that, for example, was something crazy we did to link build. I can tell similar stories on the content creation side, which is the third pillar of SEO.
So thank you for the overview. I want to switch gears a little bit to fundraising, to sort of rephrase Wally Grzinski's question a little bit. I mean, you had 45 people reject you at the Series A, and then Sequoia, you do your Series B. What did you learn about successful fundraising, or was really just 99.9% of it that it started working?
So 90% of a fundraise is timing relative to your revenue growth. The greater your revenue growth, the higher leverage you're going to have, the more interest you're going to have. The lower your revenue growth, the lower your leverage. So that is the ultimate determinant of fundraising. Within that, there are better practices and worse practices around structuring your process, around how to get intros to VCs. But at the end of the day, it's about substance underneath the hood rather than kind of like the process you're running. So I'm not sure I have a ton of advice to provide about that. I just look at I guess one great strength of our founding team is we all have very complementary skill sets. So I, for example, thrive in the weeds. I love building. I love having my headphones on, organizing in Excel spreadsheets, analytics, building teams and systems. Jonathan is a great team manager and motivator. Marco is a world's great inspirer and communicator. And so having him as CEO has benefited the company enormously for a variety of reasons. One critical one has been in pitching Thumbtack. So though 90% of it is the underlying business growth, 10% or another 20 or 30% or whatever is how you tell the story and the conviction and confidence with which you tell your story and your persuasive ability. As crazy as it sounds, yeah, a lot of it is numbers, but a lot of it is human. And so if you have someone on your team who is a great salesperson and persuader, that is of enormous benefit to you. And I think can often go under-recognized as a talent in the tech community because in tech, it's all about numbers and data.
How did Marco / you guys convince people early on, or even just respond to the criticism of, hey, what do you guys really know about this industry?
Yeah. So people, the conventional wisdom in building a marketplace when we started was, everybody knows the way to bootstrap a marketplace is to start in a specific category like Amazon did in books, or start in a specific geography like Yelp did in San Francisco. You guys are doing every category in every geography. You're boiling the ocean you're spreading yourselves way too thin. Your product sucks. You're never gonna be able to make a good product because you're trying to bite off way more than you can chew. And, in many ways, they were right. So we didn't have experience in this industry. We were biting off way more than we could chew in many ways. So our product suffered for many years. That said, it turns out in retrospect, the only way to build a broad local services writ large that's across so many categories was to do this like mass category and geography approach with a minimum viable product. One thing that people didn't quite understand was, though our product wasn't great, it was good enough to be useful to a huge portion of people. And so we kind of just had to convince the world through results that what we were doing was right. The reason it was the right move for this specific marketplace is because cadence of use of any particular service is very low. It's like, I had a house cleaner growing up, and we had one house cleaner in 30 years. So it's like, it's hard to build a marketplace around hiring one thing every 30 years. Similar with like weddings. You're getting married once, maybe twice in life. You need an electrician once every few years. So you can't build a house cleaning or a wedding specific or an electric specific marketplace because the frequency of use is too low. But when you aggregate them all together, the average American household uses a Thumbtack service 8, 10, 12, 14 times in a year, and that's plenty of use.
Totally. Aaron asks, is it ever too early to optimize for SEO, especially with 18 to 24 month turnaround time on results?
If SEO is a good channel for your business, then the most important thing to do from day one is build your site architecture in a way that is understandable by Googlebot. The number one problem I see early stage companies get into is e-commerce or other marketplaces, they build their site without an eye to SEO. They build it for the product that they're building for their users, and they get 12, 18, 24 months into it. Suddenly, their entire product, all their email marketing, their tech stack, their code is optimized for the site architecture they've built. And then they go back and they say like, okay, now we want to invest in SEO. And step number one in SEO is building an easily understandable site architecture, like URL structure for Googlebot. You're telling me I have to totally get rid of my old URL architecture and instead do one that's worse for our users but is right for Googlebot? Get out of here. The team is then split about it. There's a huge sunk cost in what you've already built. Is the bet really worth making? So I think even if you're unsure that SEO is right for you and that it is the right channel, a very early thing you can do is make sure that your URL structure is built for Googlebot.
Totally. Quick follow-up to that. Is there a decision framework or model used when deciding SEO or just conviction?
Yeah, it's all about keyword volume and whether there are high intent keywords for your product. Thumbtack is built for SEO. It's like the number one place people go to hire a lawn care professional is Google. It's like lawn care Toledo. So it was a no-brainer for us. The Google keyword tool could have validated for us just by typing in all the keywords and telling us, these are high volume keywords. So, but there are other companies that people don't go to Google to search for your service. It's like, for Uber and Lyft in the early days, people weren't going to Google really and typing in taxi service. It was like they were looking at the yellow pages for the local phone number. They just had it taped to their wall. So it was low volume keywords. SEO is not a big part of their initial strategy. So it's all about search volume and whether the keywords are high intent keywords. So needs to be at the bottom of the hiring funnel. The further up the hiring funnel it is, how to design or how to like remodel my kitchen, or how much does it cost to hire a math tutor. Those are lower intent, and yeah, we have pages built for them, but it's a really small part of our business. It's part of why House, for example, they built like an enormous business on SEO, but the keywords they were targeting turned out to be lower intent. It was like house, like design and remodel porn and all this stuff. And it turned out to be a little bit lower intent. So they pivoted a little bit to building products rather than selling services.
Yeah. You were talking about the third pillar. I believe it was content. And you said you can get a little bit more into that. Could you unpack it just a bit more?
When Google is crawling your website, it has to translate the words on your page to what it can understand. So the words on your page have to match these keywords that people are searching for. And yeah, you don't want to like stuff your page with keywords or anything like that, but the words on your page need to be optimized for the keywords that you are targeting. So what we did was we built hundreds of thousands of, we called them landing pages, that were geo keyword landing pages. So this was like, we took a list of all the top 4,000 geos in the United States, and then a list of all the top 3,000 local service keywords. And then we matched them and multiplied them together, and we had like 1 million pages or whatever. And then we needed unique content for each of those pages. So we did a bunch of things. Half of it was service professionals who uploaded their own content onto Thumbtack, and we would make sure that it was unique, and we surfaced that. So our supply strategy turned out to be a huge engine of our SEO demand. But then another part of it was building unique content ourselves. So part of that was building a huge team in the Philippines. It got up to like 1,000 people at one point. It was all work from home. Turns out that this massive operational and managerial challenge of hiring 1,000 people who all work from home, recruiting them, onboarding them, training them, QA, managing them, building a culture that they could thrive in service of first this content, but then over the course of time, we've used them for a million other things, was an unbelievable strategic advantage that nobody we know out there has kind of ever replicated. Without that huge team of very low cost but dedicated and great talent, Thumbtack wouldn't exist today, and it was a core part of our SEO strategy for many years.
Yeah. Earlier in this conversation, you talked about you broke all the rules for marketplaces. Is that sort of, are you the exception that proves the rule, or do you think that the rules should be different as it relates to evaluating marketplace businesses from an investment or entrepreneur perspective?
I guess my takeaway is that marketplaces are overgeneralized. And there are some dynamics that are specific to each one: supply acquisition, demand acquisition, matching. But like once you get into the specifics of acquiring supply, of acquiring demand, of matching the supply with the demand, of what is the revenue model, like basically every single marketplace is different. And it's almost impossible to learn from other marketplaces and apply it to your own marketplace. The way we built those early mechanics that worked, it was all testing and failing and stumbling and iterating. We didn't over intellectualize things because we couldn't. It was like we were surprised at 80% of our A/B tests. We would do office pool bets on like which A/B tests are going to work and which aren't. And it was like, we were almost all wrong for almost all of the A/B tests. And it was impossible to anticipate ex ante what users would like and what they wouldn't. So, I think in marketplaces, this at least in the early stages in the mechanics, this design first thinking about like Steve Jobs iPhone type thing, it's like, I haven't seen that work for these early marketplaces. It's been a lot about just like grueling, hard, 1%, 2% improvements on like the core supply, demand, matching revenue model mechanics that you figure out.
Maybe segueing into, I want you to talk a bit about the sort of emotional, managing your own psychology portion of managing sort of the rise and the fall, the ups and the downs. You wrote this Quora blog post that's one of the most viral blog posts on Quora in history, and about that exact thing. Maybe you can just talk about one or two learnings or tidbits here that may be relevant for the audience.
Yeah. So the Quora post, it kind of talks about how going after the dream of building a scaled startup is romantic, and it requires dreamers and optimists to do it because reason tells you no every step of the way. So there's this romantic element to it where it's like you're lusting after certain things. You're longing to be matched with the premier VC. There are these, beautiful icons out there that we all look up to in tech. And basically the best any of us can do is keep those as icons very romantically, but just work one day at a time, one foot in front of the other to get there. It's very hard to have these hopes and dreams and always be watching Elon Musk and reading his tweets and looking at, Steve Jobs and Jack Dorsey. And listen, if you are on a slide in a playground in San Francisco and you're with your friends and you come up with an idea when you've slid down that slide to create a 140 character messaging platform, and you immediately go back to your office and code up V1, and a month later it goes viral globally and suddenly you're Jack Dorsey, congratulations. But 99.9% of us, that's not who we are. We build it and they don't come. So we have to sit there and market it and do the grunt work over years and hire great people, dial in our processes and grind. That is what we have done. And it's a long journey, but honestly, I don't see it done that many other ways.
Awesome. That's a perfect place to wrap. And that embodies you and what you've done at Thumbtack. With that in mind, if we can give a digital round of applause to Sander. Thank you so much for joining this live chat.
Thanks, everyone. Great to be here.
If you're an early stage entrepreneur, we'd love to hear from you. Check us out at villageglobal.vc.